Or would like to welcome our friend Jimmy A. of Spring Lake Heights, New Jersey. And he's going to be speaking today on Tradition 7.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, buddy. My name is Jimmy. I am an alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. My home group is called a Design for Living group down in Neptune, New Jersey. I have a sponsor. I have a service sponsor who happens to be on right now. I sponsor a bunch of guys, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28th, 1987. So extremely grateful for my sobriety and this way of life. And I also have the honor and privilege of serving Area 44 as the Panel 71 delegate. So all good things going on in my life right now. And boy, I would be horrified if I had to hear somebody speak 70 minutes on a tradition at one point. I mean, I could promise you now that I won't be speaking 70 minutes on this tradition, but I'll be looking forward to the questions and answers because, as I like to call this stump the drunk is what I like to call the Q&A usually. And if I don't know the answer, guess what? There are people on here right now that do know the answer. So, but again, I want to thank District 24 for this opportunity to participate in this workshop that you guys have been doing for the last couple of weeks. I was on a conference. I've been on a conference since last night. A couple of us have been. It's a big book conference. They're going through the steps. Speakers from all over, 1,000 people. It's called the Fellowship of the Spirit in Toronto. And boy, I've been so like on a yo-yo of emotions since last night. I mean, the speakers are just they get you by the heartstrings, and they talk about the power of Alcoholics Anonymous and what we do here, and this way of life that we've been given, all of us. And I had a conversation about 2 hours ago with my old sponsor, who's speaking right now at the same time on step 11. And he said, by the way, I just want to let you know that the talk you're doing on the seventh tradition today is just as important as the talk I'm doing on step 11. And he understands the power and the importance of the second, legacy of unity and how we keep our groups together. And so here I am. I'm going to be speaking on, and again, I'm not an expert on the traditions. I don't speak for Alcoholics Anonymous, as we know, none of us do. But I'm going to share my experience with this, and it might be different from your experience, but this is what I've been taught through the years. Now, it's really important to understand that you don't need to be a delegate, you don't need to be a GSR to understand the traditions. The way I look at it is, if you're committed to your sobriety and you're committed to your home group, well, that's enough to make a beginning here. We've done, so many different, workshops, like this. At my house, John has come and done workshops, tradition workshops, concept workshops. There's workshops all over the place, and especially on the Zoom platform or the virtual platform now. There are more types of traditions, concepts, service meetings than I've ever seen in the 33 and almost 34 years of sobriety that I've been around. And it's a great opportunity to really learn about what we do here, and especially these traditions. Tradition 7, there's that old little line that a lot of people say, AA's dirty little secret, sex and money. But I'm not here to speak about money. I'm here to speak about the spiritual principle of Tradition 7, which is self-support and the responsibility to that. When I was taken through the traditions the first time, it was like it was like going through the steps the first time. I just didn't understand what we were talking about. I just couldn't put two and two together. I'm a guy who didn't come into really looking at the traditions till later in my sobriety. I mean, what do I need to know this for? I was kind of closed-minded to this, contempt prior to investigation. But then what happened was I got involved with a home group, and I started to understand some of the things that were going on in a home group. And as each speaker has been speaking through the 7 weeks, I started to get this momentum of what this is really all about. I'm a big believer that, even though we have workshops, even though we have people on here right now that can give you a great traditions talk, I think for me, the best sponsor, let's call it, I have for the traditions is our literature. The 12 and 12, I'm going to reference AA Comes of Age, I'm going to talk about. Language of the Heart, where Bill's writings are in that, all the editorials, the Grapevine editorials, the pamphlets we have, the traditions checklist. There's more than enough information right now that's out there in in our literature that we could really start to have an understanding with this. And I encourage you, if you haven't been through the traditions, find somebody who has, and it's like going through the steps, sitting down and just, learning from their experience, asking a lot of questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? I mean, this is the importance of it. Um, but the way I was brought through the traditions originally, that really has kind of stuck with me, through all these years, is that, you know, we have these two pillars, right? I mean, think like a goalpost, right? And one of the goals, and here's the other goal. And the first goalpost is tradition one, right? That we're all in this together. No matter what, we're all in this together. And I think one of the greatest readings I've ever read is in tradition one, where it references this. What in heaven's name keeps us together, right? And it says, those who look closely soon have the key to this strange paradox. The AA member has to conform to the principles of recovery. His life actually depends upon obedience to spiritual principles. If he deviates too far, the penalty is sure and swift. He sickens and he dies. At first, he goes along because he must, but later he discovers a way of life he really wants to live. Moreover, he finds he cannot keep this priceless gift unless he gives it away. Neither he nor anybody else can survive unless he carries the AA message. But the moment this 12-step work forms a group, another discovery is made. That most individuals cannot recover unless there is a group. Realization dawns that he is but a small part of a great whole, that no personal sacrifice is too great for the preservation of the fellowship. He learns that the clamors of desires and ambitions within him must be silenced whenever these could damage the group. It becomes plain that the group must survive or the individual will not. And that line of he learns that the clamor of desires and ambitions within him must be silenced whenever these could damage the group. So that brings me over to the other spectrum, to the other side of the goalpost, and that's tradition 12. And in tradition 12, we're going to start talking about a word called anonymity and the spiritual significance of what that word really means. And if in the book Alcoholics Comes of Age, it says, as we've seen, anonymity is the protective mantle that covers our whole society. But is more than protection, it has another dimension, a spiritual significance. And this leads to tradition 12, which reads, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. And Bill goes on and he talks about how important this anonymity is, that our entire future of our fellowship hangs upon this spiritual principle. And if we let that principle fall away, or if we allow that principle to, not be practiced, he talks about if we forget this principle and the spirits of money, power, prestige will be loosed among us, obsessed by these evil genii, we might well founder and break up. I devoutly believe this will never happen. No AA principle merits more study and application than this one. I am positive that AA's anonymity is the key to long-time survival. So this idea of tradition one, the unity and the importance of that, we're all in this together. Right now, there is a glue that keeps us together right in this meeting. But also in tradition 12, where we need to sacrifice what? Our personal interest of money, property, prestige, control, desires, all that stuff. Why? Tradition one, so we could stick together. Now, the 10 principles that are in between those 10 other traditions are just really specific examples of personal interests that I must to agree to sacrifice to stay together. What's really important about the traditions is that we need to get the wedges out between each other in order to stay, again, unified. And what Tradition 7 says, and let me just read it. It says every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. That's the short form. The long form says the AA groups themselves ought to be fully supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. We think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, that any public solicitation of funds used in the name of Alcoholics Anonymous is highly dangerous, whether by groups, clubs, hospitals, or other outside agencies, that acceptance of large gifts from any source or by contributions carrying any obligation, whatever, is unwise. Then, too, we view with such concerns those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. Experience has often warned us that nothing can so surely destroy our spiritual heritage as futile disputes over what? Money, property, and authority, personal interest. So, what do we sacrifice here? Well, what I've come to sacrifice, or what I've learned to sacrifice, is the right to have anyone support Alcoholics Anonymous other than myself. So no outside entity is supporting us. And I'm not going to go into a history lesson here, but we have some great examples in AA Comes of Age of some of the things that we had to face early on in our for our survival. And we all know the story of when Bill got sober, and this grandiose idea that let's build hospitals, let's have paid missionaries, let's write this book. That Bill's mind was really in overdrive, but the problem was we had no money to do any of that stuff. So in AA Comes of Age, it talks about money and AA's attitude towards it. Wealth had ruined many men and nations, so would it ruin us? That was the question Bill was asking us. Even though he had all these grandiose ideas, he kept on asking himself, would money hurt us? Would money ruin us? Especially in America, where money was the symbol of prestige and power and comfort. And again, fast forward into Tradition 12. What do we sacrifice? Money, property, prestige. Now, this is going to be a common theme for me anyway through this, talking about this tradition. This idea that our unity depends upon the obedience of setting aside or putting aside or sacrificing or giving up all those personal interests. He goes on to say, after a while, we woke to the pleasant fact that AA as such was not going to require much money after all. When we got rid of our grandiose ideas about hospitals, research, rehabilitation, and education, not much of the bill was left to pay. He goes on to say, a big factor in our thinking at the time was the philosophy of St. Francis of Assisi. He also began as a lay movement, one man carrying the good news to the next. It's what we do here. It's one drunk helping another. For the purpose of his society, Francis thought corporate poverty to be fundamental. The less money and property they had to quarrel about, the less would be diversion from our primary purpose. And just like today, in AA, his outfit did not need much money to accomplish its mission. Why be tempted and diverted when there was no need for it? Therefore, AA adopted the wisdom of St. Francis as its own. Not only would we have the least possible service organization, Debbie talked about that last week, and talked a lot about, well, obviously, Tradition 6, we would use the least possible money. For us, this does not mean no money at all, but it does mean the least possible money to do the job well. It is in this sense that AA has declared for the principle of corporate poverty, it's the chief safeguard of our future. And again, we have a lot of examples of why why money was going to become a problem. Bill, and we always read about the story of the Rockefellers, and Bill wanted to have this whole idea of having that support from Rockefeller, that he would basically give us the money to do what we needed to do, to build these hospitals, to have these paid missionaries, and then eventually, to have this book. But one of the greatest things that Rockefeller ever did for us was what it says here. I think money will spoil us, said Rockefeller. Uh, so AA stayed poor. St. Francis had given us the idea, but John D. wisely forced us to live up to it. This was the oddly assorted pair who were really responsible for AA's tradition on money. Thank God for them both. So what did Rockefeller gave us? He gave us that idea of self-support. He gave us the idea that we can't tie ourselves to anyone when it comes to money. That if we're going to survive, we're going to pay our own way, and we're not going to rely upon any outside agency to, help us go, to do what we do. He talks about two other things in here historically, and I'm not going to, how we could become tightwadded, how we could become penny pinchers. It's amazing how when we talk about our severed tradition, that a dollar in a basket today isn't really a dollar in a basket today is the same is not the same dollar that was put in a basket in 1935, if they even put a dollar in a basket back then. We do this thing called the post conference reports, and a lot of you guys have been there. And we do this little financial thing called sitting around a picnic table. I think it's called. I can't. It's escaping my mind right now. But in there, the treasurer for the General Service Office always puts, this thing what a dollar equates back then to what it equates today. And, a dollar back in 1935 equates to $18 and change today. So are you willing to put $18 into the basket today when you're at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? So what happens is, in this little historical thing, it talks about how tight we get with money. And all of a sudden, it's funny, and we always make a joke of this. We always laugh about this, how, people walk into a meeting with a Starbucks, they got the $5,000 phone, they got the, $400 pair of sneakers on, but when it comes to putting a dollar in a basket, that seems to be a problem. The thing that saved their life, all we could throw is a few, a dollar or change in it, right? And Bill talks about that in this. He talks about he was trying to help a guy who walked into the 24th Street Clubhouse one day, and the guy was down on his luck, and Bill, being a big shot that he was, like a lot of us act sometimes, he put a $5 bill in the guy's hands, which was a lot of money, obviously back then, right? But that night at the meeting, one of the members of the clubhouse said, he asked everyone to put a little bit more money in the basket because our rent was due. And what Bill did was he fished into his pocket and he found a 50-cent piece. And, and he said to himself, I can't afford to throw this 50-cent piece into the basket. And he went back into his pocket and found a dime, and he threw a dime into the hat. And what he writes here is, what he came to a realization was that he says, a minute later, I woke up. I, who had boasted about my generosity that morning by giving that guy a $5 bill to help him along, was treating my own clubhouse than the alcoholics who had forgotten to send the foundation their dollars. I realized that my $5 gift to the backslider was an ego-feeding act, bad for him and bad for me. There was a place in AA where spirituality and money would mix, and that was in a hat. I've never since have criticized anybody for failing to send a dollar or so to headquarters. And then he talks about the third historical reason why money was such a problem back then, and it has to do with acceptance of outside funds, with people that would leaving in their wills $10,000 to the General Service Office, and what he writes in here about that is the foundation of if the foundation, which is now our General Service Office, obtain money from outside sources, its trustees might be tempted to run things without reference to the wishes of AA as a whole. Every alcoholic feeling relieved of responsibility would shrug and say, oh, the foundation is wealthy. Why should I bother? So we have a responsibility, and a responsibility is that we can't be financially taken care of by the things that are out there. We need to take care of ourselves in here. And that is the spiritual principle of self-support. It's the responsibility that we carry our own weight and we take care of ourselves. They declared that the principle that AA must always stay poor, reasonable running expenses plus a prudent reserve would henceforth be the foundation's financial policy. So that's a little bit about of that history. But what's really important about it is what Rockefeller did. He gave us this self-support, this idea of not being tied to anyone or anything. Back in the long form, it opens up by saying the AA groups themselves ought to be fully self-supported by the voluntary contributions of their own members. We think that each group should achieve this ideal. That's a pretty powerful statement for me. Is your group supporting your group? Are your members of your group supporting your group? You know, are they being responsible in doing that? Or are we expecting people to come to our group and to fill our basket or fill our hat with the money so we could be supportive of our group? Now, I've heard this talked about in so many different ways, these first three lines, but I think we think that each group should soon achieve this ideal, this guiding principle, that its own members will support its group. And the way I equate that is like if you came to my house for dinner, I wouldn't expect you to come to my house and pay for that dinner. I mean, if you want to bring a little Entenmann's and a little, cheesecake, that's another story. But to come to my house and to be support my meal that I'm making for you, I look at my home group like that. Is my home group supporting itself? Can my home group support itself without money from other people that come into who are not members of my group? That's an important question. So I think our AA treasuries, there's I look at it this way. It is really important to be informed where our money is going. Just writing a couple of notes I'm looking at here, that we are responsible enough to send to the right entities. Is my GSR coming back from a district meeting and letting me know how much money is in the district, or is he bringing back information of how much money is going on in the area? Is my DCM giving that GSR that information? Is my intergroup rep, if my group even has an intergroup rep, coming back and letting me know the financial picture of the intergroup? Is the delegate even coming back and letting us know about the financial picture of the General Service Office? I think that's what we need to know. I've heard so many people talk about their treasuries of sending the money to the same entities and not even understanding how much money is sitting in these groups or these entities. My home group is a perfect example of that. We kind of, I don't want to say demand, but we want to know how much money the district has. We want to know what's going on or how much the prudent reserve in the area is. We want to know what the financial picture is of the General Service Office. And thank God we get that information because we make an informed decision in my group on where we're going to send our money or our contributions. I don't know how many years ago it was, but at the time, the area was doing quite well like it is today. The district is more than enough, has more than enough money. At the time, at the time, Intergroup was doing fantastic. So we made a decision as a group to send all our money, 100% of that money, to the General Service Office, and we've been doing that probably now for at least 3 years. So it's just really important that each group is informed about how these entities are doing. So if you're not getting that in your group, I would really recommend or really suggest that you go up to your GSR to ask him, what does the district look like? What does the area look like? If you don't know, contact the DCM in your district. Ask them that question. What does it look like? What does the General Service Office look like? What's the information that the delegate is bringing back? I try as a delegate now to try to inform the whole area. I just sent out, some of the financials from last year. So we have a responsibility to send to the entities that are in need or that need help, and not just keep on sending hundreds of dollars to a district that's not really doing anything, especially in this pandemic, and nothing drives me crazier. Maybe it's just my opinion, but we send money to a district to do the most important work, which is in the district of carrying a message in the district. And then the district decides, well, you know what? we can't come up with any good ideas, so let's just send out money to up to the general service office. Well, that's not why groups are sending you money. The groups are expecting the districts to carry the message, or to, carry the message to the best of their ability, and, think outside the box. I know that's hard, to come up with ideas of how we're going to spend money, and carry the message within our districts. I know, and I don't know who's on here from District 28, but little impartial because I know the DCM. But I know one of the things they're doing right now is, there's there's a very famous bar over here in Neptune called Kelly's Tavern, and right next to Kelly's Tavern is this 300-foot electrical sign. And what they did, the district, was they bought some time on that electrical sign. And I don't know what the cost was, but for the whole summer coming up, they're going to have this sign that says, "You have a drinking problem?" Now, I don't know about you, but in my old drinking days, I came out of Kelly's and I looked up a lot. And I don't know if that sign wasn't there back in those days, but I can only imagine that could, light a fuse maybe in somebody's mind. Our public, PI, PI committee in the area, this is one of the things we started with, the train posters. You might come off a drunk, you might come off a train drunk, and all of a sudden you see the train poster. If you have a drinking problem, call, 1-800 blah blah blah. Right. So these are just some of the ideas that the districts have to think about. Right. The groups don't want you to send the money to GSO. If they did, they would just send it on the first place. It's really imperative that somehow, some way, you guys start carrying a message in the district. And that's a little bit of a soapbox talk on my part because I was at DCM, and I know how hard sometimes it is to come up with ideas on how we're going to carry their message, especially in these times. So, so what about AA as a whole? I'm just thinking of some things to talk about. We got a wonderful pamphlet, I think, where money and spirituality mix, and there's a lot of great questions in here, on page 9, if you have it, or if not, and if you're not sure about the money and what we do with our money, there's just a bunch of questions that ask us, what is a prudent reserve? I know most groups have a prudent reserve. The way we do our budgets in our groups is, this is what we pay for rent. This is what we pay for insurance. This is what we pay for our basic needs, whether that's literature, coffee, that kind of stuff. And if something happened, what would we do? How much would we put away in case no contributions came in? How much money would we put away as a group, as a prudent reserve to carry the group in case something happened, right? So there's just some questions about that. Does the General Service Office have a prudent reserve? Yeah, we call it the reserve fund. We've been talking about that in the area since this pandemic hit, and how we had to have a drawdown from that. Now, some people think, oh my God, we're pulling down from a reserve fund, a prudent reserve. But the point of the reserve fund is for exactly what we're going through now. This pandemic, it hit us like hitting a brick wall. And we still have expenses at the office, but thank God we're responsible enough to have created that reserve fund, that money's there for when there's nothing coming in. Now, I'm going to talk in a couple of seconds about what has happened in the last few months with that stuff, but this is important. So I know that the groups have prudent reserves. I know that districts have prudent reserves. I also know that the area definitely has a prudent reserve. And the way the area figures out their prudent reserve is we take 50% of our recent 12-month budgeted activity, and we put that to the side for our prudent reserve. Now, sometimes you read our financials and you think you need an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. I mean, sometimes I can't even understand some of the financial stuff we do because the complexity of everything, how they put it all on paper, and then they expect a brand new GSR to bring that back to your group when it's like looking at the stock market. It's just all these numbers. I don't even know how to explain that stuff. So hopefully, if you do have trouble with that, we do have people that can help you understand that. We do have the treasurer and the alternate treasurer where you can reach out and say, listen, I'm bringing back the financial report back to my group. Can you help me or explain this to me so I could keep it in simpler terms? So, don't try to figure this out on your own. There's more than enough people that could help you. You know, is there a limit on how much an individual can contribute to GSO? I hope you know that it's $5,000 per year. Um, can people leave money in AA in their wills? I believe it went up to 10 grand per year, 10 grand. But I think there's an agenda item. I forget what the financial agenda items are for this year, but I believe there's a discussion on that 10 grand. Um, can a group have too much money? Uh, we read about that in the long form of tradition sevens. Um, we view with much concern those AA treasuries which continue beyond prudent reserves to accumulate funds for no stated AA purpose. I don't know about anyone else, man. I've been in business meetings for other groups just to sit in. Sometimes groups give a little treasury report before the meeting starts. And I'm mystified and I'm baffled by sometimes when Joe, the treasurer, says, yeah, we've got about $850 in our group treasury. The money's in a bag in between his mattress, and we're doing good. We're doing good. And everyone who doesn't have an idea of what this is all about just shakes their head like, yeah, we're doing good as a group. Meanwhile, that money's sitting there with no intended purpose. And the idea is to carry this, send that money to these entities and to be informed about these entities, so we could pay for our services, we could pay for our literature, so we could get these things out to help the guy who's out there right now who doesn't know we're in here, right? You've all heard John talk a million times, right? You always ask that question: how'd you get to Alcoholics Anonymous? It's these services that we have to pay for, this literature that needs to be paid for. This is how we get the alcohol to our meetings, right? By having pamphlets, by having books, by doing all the things that we do. Talks about, there's a whole bunch of questions in here, but the idea is get familiar with these pamphlets, get familiar with this, where money and spirituality mix. Have that conversation in your home group. We always get the financial reports after the general service conference, and it's always the same. It looks like it's always the same. That 40% of the groups, or approximately around 40% of the groups, are the only ones who contribute to Alcoholics Anonymous. If we took all the people in Alcoholics Anonymous, they always give that little breakdown. If everyone just sent, like last year, I think it was $8.06. If every member of the of Alcoholics Anonymous sent $8.06, guess what? We'd be self-supporting. We wouldn't have to rely upon the literature we sell, and we would be self-supporting. Now, again, the pandemic hits last March. Can't believe it's already a year ago, right? Contributions at the time averaged in the last 3 years about 8.2 to $8.5 million a year we would collect at the General Service Office. That obviously groups shut down. There was no money coming in. We were bringing in approximately, I think maybe 700. I forget the exact number, but about 7,000, let's say 650,000 a month. We went down to like 349, 350 in the early part of the pandemic. Come the summertime, we had to do a whole reforecast of our budget, and a call went out to the groups, they call it the fellowship rally. And, I just sent this out to all, really to the whole area. I'm sure most of you guys got this. But after they've done the audited budget, and this just shows you the power of the fellowship and the power of Alcoholics Anonymous and the responsibility of self-support, right? The 2020 contributions revenue reached an all-time high of $10,304,185. Think about that. 10 million. Our highest ever was in 2019 when we collected 8.66 million. And here we are up to 10 million because people know the thing that saved their life needed help. And that was Alcoholics Anonymous. That was 417,000 and change greater than the reforecast that we did back in, I think it was August or June, somewhere in the summer. Of that amount, approximately 20% or 2.16 million were received online. You know how many members don't even know that we have online contributions? You know how many members don't even know that we have a recurring, we have a contribution where you could put your credit card on file and have recurring contributions on a monthly basis, and you choose how much that is, $5, $10, $25 a month, you know? Again, is my group informed? Are the members of my group informed about ways of contributing money? We are grateful for the fellowship for contributing 1.44 million in the month of December to propel us past that 10 million mark. As near as anyone knows, the December 2020 total of 1.44 million is the highest single month of the seventh tradition of voluntary contributions ever. But we're not done. We're still in a pandemic. And who knows how long before all our groups get back to being face to face. And who knows what's going to happen with this Zoom or the virtual platform that we're on now. Groups are being created, groups that are going to go hybrid, groups that, this is the way it works. My groups created a Venmo account. You can create a PayPal account. There's a lot of different things out there that I guess you can create for contributions in your group. But my group, you know, and I'll throw this number out, but and I don't say this egotistically, but in the last 3 years, we averaged as a group anywhere between $10,000 and $12,000 a year sent to the General Service Office. And guess what? Because of Venmo, we're going to be sending even more this year. It just seems as though people are reaching into their pocket deeper, and understand the importance and the responsibility of self-support. Again, we're not talking about money. We're talking about the spiritual principle of self-support, right? So my group, like I said, does these contributions that way. We send it out to the right entities. Right now we're not paying rent or insurance. We have a church that says there's no need to, as you're not here. They put the insurance on this last year. It's a Catholic church we're in. They said there's, because of the school system, whatever, they have to start taking insurance. I know that's a big deal for a lot of groups now because it's not cheap. I have a large group. We have a huge group. Most of you guys have been there, right? We get over 200, 250 people on a Sunday night, and we have a Wednesday night meeting, which is pretty big. But we have all our basic needs of coffee, literature. We have a stacked literature table because it's important that that newcomer has a piece of pamphlet or a book on his way out the door if he's not sure if he belongs with us. That if he feels different, that maybe it doesn't look like me. And we're a huge white community, Neptune, right? So there's people walking in that might feel like they don't belong here because they're not white or they're not, whatever, right? So we want to make sure that we have our literature racks stacked with all sorts of information that you belong here, right? There was a question last week from the guy from Ireland. I don't know if he's on here right now, but he's asking the speaker last week, how do you feel about coins? There's a lot of groups that don't believe in giving out coins, right? My group gives out coins. But see, my group's also responsible in the fact that even though we give out coins at our anniversaries, what we also do is we hand you a birthday envelope. And the birthday envelope is just another way to contribute, right? And the idea behind the birthday envelope is, you can put whatever you want in, but the way I was taught was you put $1, $2, or $3, or $5 for every year that you're sober. So for the last 30 years of my sobriety, I've always put $2 or $3 per year at the month that I celebrate, and I send that off just as a separate contribution. Group anniversaries. We have a huge group anniversary, and we had it on this platform in January. But normally, what we do is we have a big event in January, and we have a big dinner. It's for group members only and a guest. There's usually about 125, 130 people at that. We cater the whole thing, but we don't take one dime from the seventh tradition because we know that that's not what it's for, right? So what we do is we set up at the back of our room for about 3 months of time that we're only taking contributions from group members, a separate basket for that anniversary. We understand, we're informed about the importance of that seven tradition money. It's not for parties, it's not for donuts, it's not to have Starbucks coffee. That seven tradition has one purpose and only one purpose. So we can get the message out to the person who's out there right now that doesn't know we're in here, right? And we do that in a lot of, as I said, in a lot of different ways. One of the things we don't do on our monthly anniversary, we're a big book study meeting, 3 nights, 3 Sundays of the month is a study of our basic texts. The last Sunday of the month is our monthly anniversaries. And one of the main things we say is, if you're a family or if you're a family member or a friend that's here to support your loved one, we love your support, but please do not put anything in a basket because we're self-supporting. And to a lot of them, they're baffled by that. They can't understand that we pay our own way. Because I know for a fact that there's moms and dads who are so happy that little Junior is sober that they're willing to put a couple of $100s in that basket when it goes by. But we let them know that that's not the way we work here in Alcoholics Anonymous. Participation is a big thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. Not only do we participate by showing up, and again, I'm just using my home group, and I've been to a lot of your other home groups, and we're all the same way, basically. You walk into a room where you feel that energy, you feel the Spirit of God working in there. You walk in there and you see two people reading a book over there, two guys over there having a conversation. You just feel, that pocket of enthusiasm that we talk about all the time. And we get to participate in that, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. But we also get to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous financially by being self-supporting, by putting money in the basket, and to make sure that that guy who's out there right now, just like I was out there one time, was someone who came and helped me on a 12-step call. He came and 12-step me because he knew what Alcoholics Anonymous could do for a guy like me. So those things of the birthday envelope, online contributions, putting money in a basket, these are important things that you need to know about. These are important things that your group needs to know about. And finally in this pamphlet, Bill talks about the bottom line. Now that we are sober in AA, the word support has to do with sharing with people, with self-respect, with gratitude, and what we are privileged to give, not take, in material terms. Self-respect, gratitude, and privilege to do what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, to participate financially. While the fellowship has always faced problems of money, property, and prestige, the things that we sacrifice in Tradition 12. Why? So we could stay unified, unified in our fellowship, in one form or another. Through the wisdom of the seventh tradition, we have never been diverted from our primary purpose of carrying a message to the alcoholic who still suffers, wherever he or she may be. This is the fundamental work of Alcoholics Anonymous, and to ensure that the hand of AA will always remain outstretched, money and spirituality must continue to mix. And for that, we're all responsible. If you don't have money, that's okay. We'd rather have you in a meeting than your dollar, right? But if you could contribute, then you have a responsibility to contribute. It's just, I'm blown away by the generosity of others and the generosity of our members, especially in this pandemic age. When I read that thing the first time it came out, that company that ordered it, how much money was contributed to the office, I was brought to tears because it just reminded me of what we do here, the love and care we have for each other, and the love and care we have for our fellowship, and the respect that we have for the people who do what they do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I almost missed all of this. I almost just said, who needs to know about this stuff? I'm just a guy who just doesn't drink and go to meetings at one point. Thank God I was sat down, went through these 12 steps, went through these 12 traditions, and eventually went through the 12 concepts of world service. Thank God I was brought to the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous because I have a responsibility that when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to always be there. And that's the gift that we all get here. So I don't know if I have much on the seventh tradition. I look forward to your questions or maybe some of you guys sharing your stories about the seventh tradition. I'm sure John Q, I'll put him on the spot, has a few things that he'd like to talk about, or my old friend Charlie. But all of you, if you have questions, or well, I'll let Danielle take over because she takes on the rest of the meeting. But that's all I got. Thanks.